Welcome to the Blue Halo Podcast, everybody. I hope you liked the intro. Based on the music, you should be able to tell, at least have an educated guess, what today's topic might be about. If you said circus, no, that's not quite it, but a good guess. I suppose life is like a three-ring circus for most of us, though, right? But no, it's not a circus. Now, if you said a carnival, that's close, much closer than a circus, but still a little too broad. Today's topic includes one of the most popular of all the carnival rides, second only to the carousel of all-time favorite rides. It's the Ferris Wheel, of course. That fun amusement park ride introduced in 1893, for a fun fact, at the Chicago World Fair. Bet you didn't know that fun fact. Speaking of fun facts, and then I will get to the main content of the show, I promise. The Ferris wheel was invented by a man named George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. That's a long name. He was a bridge builder. No, I take that back. He was a bridge engineer, and that makes sense. They're very similar in a way. I can see why he probably could invent the special wheel, which was named after him. Which, by the way, was called the observation wheel. And here's why. This first Ferris wheel was pretty big, 264 feet, and it had 36 cars on it around its outside. Not seats, right? Cars. There's a difference. They were like rooms or pods, and each one of those could hold 60 people each. Think of a gondola or the London Eye in England. And actually, I think the London Eye car holds less than 60. I think it's around 25 people. Back in its day, this very first Ferris wheel was very popular. Over 1 million people rode it before it was moved to places like St. Louis and San Francisco and a whole bunch of other places. But Ferris wheels are often used as a metaphor for life, aren't they? They work perfectly in that capacity. They really do. Think about it. Getting on is like our birth. Exiting the Ferris wheel is like our death. And in between, we have all the experiences of life, the ups and downs, from the great views and the wonderment of what we'll see at the top to then nearly crashing into the ground on the way down. Right? At least that's how I feel about those things. There's a fear and excitement. The seats are wobbly like so many aspects of our lives too. So a lot of metaphors. I remember one time when I was a little kid, grade school, maybe second grade, we went on a family vacation and we ended up at a carnival somewhere. I don't even remember where we were, out of state somewhere, but it was my first time on a Ferris wheel, first time riding one. And I was with my dad, and I remember looking up at this Ferris wheel and thinking how huge it was. It was enormous, to me anyway. I was just a little kid, but this ride was the tallest in the park. Santa's Village, that's where we were. That's it. It just came to me. I think we were in Santa's Village near Chicago. That would have driven me nuts until I figured it out. So anyway, Santa's Village, great place. Anyway, I thought this Ferris wheel was huge, and it scared me. I never did this before, but my dad was with me, so I went. I watched people get on and off while we stood in line, and it didn't really seem so bad. Nobody fell off or anything. So now it's our turn. And my dad lifts me up to help me get situated on the seat. And so far, so good. But then the scariest thing happened. My dad sat down. And oh my God, I thought I was going to flip out of the seat. That's how much it rocked. You know what I'm talking about, right? Those darn seats rock like crazy. I didn't know that. I couldn't tell from watching the others get on and off. I grabbed that bar in front of me like my life depended on it. That was my first white knuckling experience. I was scared out of my mind. That darn seat kept rocking right from the start. So I just closed my eyes and I hung on. And at some point, my dad saw what I was doing. My eyes were closed and my arms were stiff as boards. I'm sure I was pale as a ghost. Well, what happened next was life-changing. My dad asked me if I was scared. And I said, uh-huh. And he chuckled. But then he said, don't let fear win. And I heard him say that. I did, but I still didn't move. Fear was winning. We were stopped at this time too. Not the very top, but almost. We were on our way up for about the third time. And then he said, real gentle like, open your eyes. And I'm like, And he said, trust me, don't let fear win. He said it again. So I did. I opened my eyes. We were as high as the trees. My stomach fluttered. I was still scared. I still white-knuckled that metal rod in front of me. But now my eyes were open. And it was exciting. When the ride started going full time again, I lost my stomach every time we came over the top. But my eyes were open now. And you know what? It was beautiful. It was beautiful to be up so high and to see the park grounds from that position. I was like a bird. I'm so thankful my dad talked me into opening my eyes. That's a metaphor right there, I think. I had a choice, though. Keep my eyes closed, not see that beautiful sight from a bird's angle, stay panicked, maybe freak out, or I could have done what I did and have one of the most exhilarating times of my life. Thanks, Dad. We were discussing Ferris wheel metaphors before that story, and there's a lot of symbolism, too, out there, right, with Ferris wheels. It's used in books and stories all the time. Some of the great classics, like The Great Gatsby. Did you read that one? Really great book. Most of us read it in high school. I didn't, though. Not sure why, but I did read it when my son was in high school. It was assigned for one of his English classes, and my wife and I highly recommend this, by the way, my wife and I usually read the books they were assigned to read, just to stay on top of things. But The Great Gatsby was a great book. So much symbolism, so much hyperbole. I love hyperbole. So real quick, if you know the story, F. Scott Fitzgerald, he's the author, and he's not to be confused with Francis Scott Key, by the way. A little side note, another fun fact. Did you know those two men were related? F. Scott Fitzgerald and Francis Scott Key are related. And I'm weaving here, but I'll get back to the main point in a minute. They were distant cousins. And F. Scott Fitzgerald was named after Francis Scott Key. And if you don't know this, you should. But if you don't know this, he wrote the national anthem of the United States, known as the Star-Spangled Banner. F. Scott's full name is Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. He's the namesake of Key, who, if you're interested, was much, much older. Francis Scott Key was born on August 1st, 1779, and F. Scott Fitzgerald was born on September 24th, 1896. Over 100 years apart. So there's your history lesson for today. Back to the Ferris wheel. And I suppose we could say our English lesson. We had a history lesson. Let's also have a English lesson as well. So the Ferris wheel was a major symbol in The Great Gatsby. It was used often. It portrayed the cycle of life and death, and that makes sense. A little later, I explain how this is similar not only to our own lives, but to the life of Jesus as well. But in Gatsby, The Great Gatsby, the Ferris wheel also represents, for the character of Jay Gatsby, a type of yearning for things he once had, but then lost. Again, this is a form of life and death representation, especially relating to his love for the character Daisy. But it also represents the successes and failures of Jay Gatsby. Do you see that even here? It's life and death. Success is life, and failure is death. Read the book if you haven't. It's well worth your time. But spoiler alert, because most people either have read it or they won't read it anyway. So I'm going to spill the beans about what's probably the greatest symbolism of the Ferris wheel. And by the way, this can be applied to our own lives. That's why I'm talking about it. So here it is in The Great Gatsby. Nothing in life is guaranteed, and nothing lasts forever. Life can give us joy, among other things, but eventually everything will come to an end. For us, we will die. Ashes to ashes. It's what happens next that matters. And the Ferris wheel really does serve a greater purpose. I mean, besides being fun to ride, right? Just that alone is phenomenal. Not to mention all the people who get proposed to at the top of a Ferris wheel. I tried to find an actual number on that, but all I found were crazy stories of people who were actually proposed to. And some of those stories were pretty romantic, as maybe it should be, but some were not so much. Like the couple in Santa Monica. And I don't mean to laugh here or make light of this, but I'm sorry. This man proposes to his girlfriend at the top of a Ferris wheel while they were stopped. Of course, the cell phone camera is picking up the whole thing. So anyway, they're stopped. The timing was perfect for him. He turns to her with the ring and starts to tell her how much she means to him. And that's sweet, right? Romantic. But my heart breaks for this man. He didn't see it at first, but when he turned to her with the ring in the box, her face was, I want to say priceless, but I don't think that's the right word. It was the opposite of priceless. She scowled. She wasn't on the same page as him. So as he's speaking, from the heart, mind you, she's shaking her head no. But he proceeded. He was probably super nervous. And when he said the magic words of, "Will you marry me?" she immediately said, "No. No, I can't do that." I think he was stunned. I'm sure he was confused, for sure. You can always tell when someone is confused. They cocked their head to the side. I think maybe there was some editing to the video as well. I'm not sure why he would show this to anyone. But there, as the video goes on, there was this super long pause where neither one was talking. She kept looking around. He looked like he was holding back tears. I feel bad for the guy, but not to make light of his situation, but the Ferris wheel wasn't moving either. They were just stuck at the top. And the video went on for several minutes. And if it was me, I don't think I would have posted something like that. But again, I might be missing something. There might be more details that, of course, the viewer isn't aware of. And maybe it was a setup. Maybe it was a fake video, but it looked real. And I think it does make for a great story. The moral of that story, though, is, well, you better be sure the answer is yes before you put yourself in a position where you might get stuck. Like I said, most of the time, Ferris wheels are fun and exciting, but there is the occasional situation, like a marriage proposal, that goes bad. But back to the original premise. There's so much symbolism and hyperbole and the metaphors that a Ferris wheel can bring. Even in the law enforcement world, there's something called the Ferris wheel theory of policing. And I'm sure this theory can be applied to many industries. I'm sure, not just policing. But as it relates to this show, imagine any police department or sheriff's department as a giant, half-submerged Ferris wheel sitting in the middle of a lake. Yeah, you have to use your imagination. Now, something you need to know is that police administrators are always on the lookout for new ideas, innovative ideas, things that are new or advanced, maybe even creative, all relating to police work. And the idea is to make things not only better for the public, but also for the officers. And this happens in two basic ways. And those are what we call in law enforcement technical policing and community policing. Just so you have an understanding, technical policing would be things like using police squads and computers and radios and things like that, right? Technical items to help an officer respond more quickly and be more efficient. Simple. And community policing is a way of policing by working side by side with the citizens. And not just the citizens in neighborhoods, but business owners and civic leaders, and basically getting out of the squad to mingle with people, to let them see that police are human. They're human too. So back to the Ferris wheel analogy. The Ferris wheel keeps on turning. Of course it does. Sometimes it stops for a little while, but generally it keeps moving. So now what happens is, as police departments become more technical, meaning becoming more efficient by way of technology, what tends to happen is the officers start to lose touch with the community, with the citizens. Before this change, think of the old beat cop you've seen in the movies, okay? Walking down the sidewalk, spinning his nightstick in his hand as he whistles a happy tune. Yeah, right. Like that happens. But before all the technology, that beat cop knew everyone in the neighborhood. And because he had a rapport or a relationship of some kind, he could handle problems without all the technology. Because what comes with technology? Expenses, to name one thing. Materials, training, all that costs money. The Ferris wheel keeps moving, though. And rising out of the water is a new gondola. And that new gondola is called community policing. Remember the old beat cop, right? We started with that. Then moved to technical policing. And now we're back to a new form of the beat cop. But it's now called community policing. It's the same thing, same type of thing. Now the officers get out of their squads and they mingle again. They walk the beat again. And this time, other programs are started to get the community more involved, like neighborhood watch programs. Now, as in the old days, the citizens can put a face to the police department. The people once again see the police as human beings. But wait, these administrators now see a problem. If the police are now out mingling, not in their squad cars, they can't take calls that aren't close to them. The Ferris wheel keeps spinning. Expenses are higher now, but for another reason. More police are needed to cover the area due to what now? Lack of mobility, right? But that takes a lot of time. The hiring process can take a year in some cases. That's how long it took me when I was going through the process. And the training alone can be at least 6 months, let alone going to the police academy. Now, in the meantime, the citizens aren't getting quick service, are they? Because response times are slow. Not to worry, though. The Ferris wheel is still spinning, and up comes a new gondola. Now, a brand new idea is brought forward by the powers that be. Let's put more police in squad cars. Great idea. The officers were now able to handle many more calls and were much more efficient. Response times felt like crazy. All was good. That is, until it wasn't. The Ferris wheel is spinning. After a few years, the administrators, they're always looking for new ideas. They discover that using the police squad cars is causing officers to lose touch with members of the community. And the Ferris wheel keeps spinning. I hope you liked my little parable there. How often do we have a back and forth like that in our own lives? Going back to the beginning, starting and ending at the same spot. Probably a lot. And I'll bet the solution to your issue is similar to the solution for the Ferris wheel theory of policing. The answer, of course, is to use a combination of the two. Technical and community policing. A compromise. If you're dealing with something similar, where you seem to be paddling on only one side of the canoe, would it help to compromise? Yeah. Happens, for better or worse, in government all the time. Think about it. Speaking of starting and ending in the same spot like a Ferris wheel, the Bible talks about this a few times as well. Have you all heard of the phrase, ashes to ashes and dust to dust? Or how about this one? For you were made from dust, and to dust you will return. Have you heard of those? That was a trick question, actually. The phrase ashes to ashes and dust to dust is not in the Bible per se. It actually comes from the Book of Common Prayer. I think a lot of people think it comes from the Bible. I know in a way it does, not directly, but indirectly. I'm sure this prayer was taken from Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, where it says, by the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground. Since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. There's a few other places in the Bible that speak about dust. Genesis in 2 places, actually. It's in Job, and it's in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 20, where it says, all go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. Pretty powerful. It shows who the boss is, doesn't it? We all come from dust, and we all return to dust. This is the result of Adam and Eve sinning in the Garden of Eden. That's where it all started, with their sin. Do you remember what they did? Most people say they ate forbidden fruit. That's true. They say it was an apple, right? That's probably not true. It was more likely a type of fruit like mango or a fig or grape. But guess what? We don't know. We don't know because the Bible doesn't describe it. We can only speculate, make an educated guess based on the other information that was provided. If you think about it, does it really matter? Adam and Eve disobeyed God by eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They disobeyed God. Adam and Eve lost paradise. I'm not sure how to describe how big a deal that is. To lose paradise? That's a tragedy. Because they sinned, they were the first humans to sin. But because they sinned, God sent them out of the garden and into the world. The Garden of Eden was paradise. Remember that. They were now banished. Not only that, but their physical condition changed. They now could grow old. They were now mortal. They weren't going to live forever. Before they were, not now. They started as dust and will return to dust. And in between, life won't be easy. The verse starts out, by the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food. They will have to work to eat. In fact, in the previous 2 verses to this one, God says that Adam's life working in the fields would be marked with pain and frustration. It says the ground, that the ground itself would be cursed. What does that even mean? Cursed ground means it would be difficult to grow crops. More work, more frustration just to survive. And not only that, they're mortal, like I said before, which means Adam and Eve will die. Death is the final consequence of the sin, and God announces this in the verse. I already stated the first half. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food. The second half says, until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. This is serious. They lost everything. And they're now vulnerable to pain and to suffering. And they will die. They did die. And because of their original actions, we need Jesus. Let's talk about that next.
Communicating with your children isn't always easy, especially on an emotional level. Until now, Pillow Thoughts is a journal approach of communicating between an adult and a child. So if you've ever had trouble communicating with your child, know that you are not alone. Many parents have the same concern, and there is a solution. Pillow Thoughts. Maybe you want to express to them just how special they are, or maybe they would like to express themselves to you. Let Pillow Thoughts provide the means of communication. Just place the Pillow Thoughts journal under their pillow when you have something to share with them, and they will do the same. It's a loving, private way to communicate with your children that takes away any pressure and stress, for the both of you. To learn more, go to www.pillow-thoughts.com. Don't wait. Writing is good therapy, and it just might make your relationship with your child stronger than ever. Go to www.pillow-thoughts.com and learn how you can get your copy today. Don't miss those special thoughts you and your children can share together. Pillow Thoughts says, I love you.
I'm so bored.
Honey, let's play Random Road Trip.
There's nothing to do.
Let's play Random Road Trip.
Hey, I know. Let's play Random Road Trip.
Great idea, honey.
Go to www.randomroadtripthegame.com to to learn how you can create a lifetime of memories while spending quality time with the people that you care about. And all for just $20.
Hey, I just had a great idea. The holidays are right around the corner. We should give Random Road Trip games as gifts this year.
Or we should give Random Road Trip games as gifts this year.
I don't know how you come up with these great ideas. What was the website again?
It's www.randomroadtripthegame.com.
Welcome to fun.
We all can relate to a Ferris wheel, can't we? Your life is probably very much like a Ferris wheel. But you know what? In a way, so was Jesus' life. Bet you never thought about that. Not in the same way, maybe. But there was a beginning like yours, a journey upward like your life, and then an end, again, like yours. We all die, and so did Jesus. Not in the same way, of course. And we will not rise after 3 days like Jesus. And we certainly didn't save the world from sin. And I would never make light of that. But isn't it nice to know that Jesus and all of us have some things in common? Before I forget, I want to mention that this episode is dedicated to my friend Carl. He is no longer with us, passed away a few years back, but he loved Ferris wheels, and he loved life, and he loved the excitement Ferris wheels gave him, especially at the top when you got stuck for a while and the seat would rock back and forth, like I talked about before, and people like me felt like I was going to fall out, but people like him loved it and kept the rocking going. I probably rode more Ferris wheels with him than anyone else, even my wife and kids. But he just loved them so much that he had a philosophy about them. I guess you could call it a philosophy. Maybe the philosophy came from riding, or maybe he liked riding them because of the philosophy he had. I don't know. Anyway, he's the inspiration for this episode. We were pretty close in middle school and high school and through most of college, but then we went different ways. He went on to grad school after graduation, and I quit during my junior year, I'll admit, and opened a small business. And that eventually failed, but then I went back to finish my degree several years later, and that was during my policing days, and that I'm not going to get into. That's another story. But I was a 30-year junior in college until I finished. So Carl and I, and sometimes a group of friends, would go to the carnival every year when it came to town. I don't know about your town, but where I live, every year a carnival would come to town, and it was pretty cool. This was before the days of the big amusement parks like Six Flags that started popping up all over the place. Anyway, I said Carl had a philosophy about Ferris wheels. Actually, that's what I'm calling it, a philosophy. He didn't actually say to me, "Hey, Jeff, this is my philosophy about Ferris wheels." I picked up on it myself. I picked up on how he felt over the years of riding them with him. So what I'm about to share with you is my take on his belief system and how Ferris wheels play a part in that belief system. Now, he never said it in these exact words, but his first point was to feel alive. He didn't coin the acronym YOLO, but you've all heard it, right? YOLO. But that's how he felt. YOLO is you only live once, right? And it's true. Make the most out of our lives, but also feel life, the excitement. That's what a Ferris wheel gave him. He'd always say, "I hope we get stuck at the top." Yeah, not my favorite thing, but it was fun. But that's the point. Getting to the top of the Ferris wheel of life. He went on to become a dentist in the Navy, of all things. That's partly why we lost touch. He ended up traveling the world. Last I heard, he ended up in Maine somewhere, was married, and was fortunate enough to have 2 daughters before he passed. But get to the top. That was always the goal. Carl also believed in giving credit where credit was due. He loved his mother more than anyone. His father had passed away early. I never knew his dad. I always felt sorry for him because I have a great dad, and I wondered what it was like for him. We never talked about it, though. Maybe we should have. But he gave credit to his mother for his success in school, in sports, in music. In high school, he played in a band. Played mostly 70s and 80s rock. He was the drummer. He was pretty good. Couldn't sing to save his life, but he played okay. I remember one time they played at a church festival, and his big drum solo was coming up. You know how bands always do that when they introduce the band members? Each one plays a little solo. He hated that. No one knew, though. I couldn't tell he hated it. He did great. But the singer threw him under the bus at this festival. The band took a break, and Carl was late to return. And the lead singer, who happened to be his brother, his older brother, and all the other band members were ready to start, but Carl wasn't there. So the lead singer, again, his brother, told the audience what they were waiting for, which was Carl. Now, he could have said nothing, but he didn't. He told the audience that Carl was in the bathroom because he was so nervous about his drum solo. Sold him out. So when Carl finally got back on stage and took his spot behind the drums, the lead singer says, "Let's hear it for Carl, everybody." And everybody clapped. I can still see this in my head. His face turned as red as I've ever seen it. Embarrassed and angry. I told him it was funny, but he was ticked. He was so mad at his brother. The drum solo was fine, though. He didn't quit the band until grad school, so I think he must have got over it. Carl's third philosophical point, my words here, my takeaway from his life, was about going for it when you have the chance. Go for it. What does this mean? It means win or lose, putting 100% effort into at least trying to reach your goal. Sometimes you'll succeed, sometimes you won't, but you'll never know. And this is where Carl made me think differently. Typically, we would say this: you'll never know until you what? Try, right? You'll never know until you try. But that's not really accurate, is it? There's something more than just trying. It's called effort. And with what we're talking about right now, what Carl was saying is you'll never know until you try with maximum effort to achieve your goal. That made perfect sense. I can try to run a marathon. I can hear that starting whistle and take that first step and then quit and say I tried. Yeah, I tried, but what effort did I put in? Zero effort. I remember participating in a color run one time with a group of friends. I did the best I could that day, which means I finished. I crossed that finish line with no bragging rights, I can assure you. But I finished. Afterward, when everyone was gathering around, eating donuts, drinking coffee, just talking with each other, a few of my friends that were in our group told the rest of the group that during the run, they took a detour and spent most of the time in a tavern that was near the running route. Now, I'm no prude. When I heard this, and also know that my entire body was sore at the time, so I may not have been in my right mind, but when I heard this, I was a little jealous. I have to admit, I know they had a good time. I'm telling you this to lighten the mood a little while making the point that as it related to the race, I put in my best effort and finished somewhere in the back of the pack. And that's okay. And getting back to Carl's position, his philosophy, I tried and put my best effort forward. Now, I'm not saying you always have to do that. My friends hanging out in a bar instead of running, to me, that's not a big deal. And I'm sure it was fun for them. What this point is saying is when whatever you are doing has a lot of value to you, you had better put forth your best effort. Or maybe you don't have any room for complaining if things don't go your way. A baseball coach once told my son's team that practice does not make perfect. We've all heard that saying, right? That practice makes perfect. Well, this coach said that wasn't true. And he was right. I agree with him. Perfect practice makes perfect. It's a similar principle to what Carl lived by. Do your best and do it right, and good things will happen most of the time. How does this relate to my Ferris wheel metaphor? Buy your ticket, folks, and get on board. Life doesn't just happen. In the end, we only regret the chances we didn't take. But you must give maximum effort sometimes if you want to succeed. Let's move on. There's a wonderful article written by Kate Alexander titled Jesus and the Ferris Wheel that shows a Ferris wheel metaphor for understanding the Beatitudes spoken by Jesus from the Gospel of Luke. And what are these Beatitudes, you might be asking yourself? They're the blessings that Jesus spoke of from the Sermon on the Plain. And they're not to be confused with Jesus' words and blessings from the Sermon on the Mount found in Matthew. The two sermons are similar in many ways, but also different. And there is, There's discussion, let's say, much discussion as to whether both sermons were actually the same sermon, with each gospel writer having a different viewpoint. It's a little confusing, so I think I'm going to address that in a special mini Halo episode very soon. But for now, here are the Beatitudes from Luke. There are 4 of them. Here they are. Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when men hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. So there's 4 in Luke and there's 8 in Matthew. But after the 4 in Luke, Jesus says this: Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven. For that is how their fathers treated the prophets. There you go. Like I said, I'm going to do a special episode on the Beatitudes very soon, and the woes too. I'm sure you've heard of them. They come right after the Beatitudes. We have the blessings first, and then we get a little taste of the other side, the righteous anger of Jesus. Not good for us if we fall into the woes category. So stay tuned. Now, Kate brings up a good point in her article that there's a difference in the way the Beatitudes are portrayed in Matthew's version of the Sermon on the Mount and Luke's version. Both can be correct at the same time, even if we discover that they come from the same sermon. That can happen. But where Matthew's version is more comforting, her word there, but I agree, like when he writes, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, and blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. That's comforting. In this case, hunger and poverty are described in terms that make them what she calls spiritual categories. And she writes, if we just have the right disposition, we can all count ourselves among the blessed. But Luke's version is very different. Still Kate's words here. Jesus is clearly talking about actual poverty and real hunger and need. Blessed are you who are poor, hungry, sad, and expendable, he says. The kingdom of God will be yours, and you will be filled. And here's where we bring in the Ferris wheel analogy. Kate calls it the Ferris wheel of fate. Luke brings in a list of woes. I talked about it earlier, and that's scary. Jesus says, woe to you who are rich and full and happy and popular now. You've already received your consolation. And then, as Kate writes, Jesus goes on to tell us this: just wait, you will become hungry and sorrowful. In her words, she says the teaching, whether this one or these teachings by Jesus, feels like a divine Ferris wheel of fate. Like a Ferris wheel, our fortunes will be reversed, whether we're on top or the bottom. That's an interesting way to bring the Ferris wheel metaphor into this episode. But there's more. The Beatitudes should bring hope if you are a person in need. What happens in this life is not the end. We know that. There's more and a much greater life. But also the opposite is true. If you are at the top now, if you have riches now, and the wrong kind of riches, mind you, Jesus is saying, watch out. Isn't that what he's saying? Kate writes that the first step is to recognize that the Beatitudes are not advice and they're not predictions. Okay, so what does this mean? Because to me, it seems like they are. It seems like Jesus is warning us or giving advice on how we should live. And if we don't live properly, this is where the prediction comes in. Then we go down the wrong path. She quotes Barbara Brown Taylor. Some of you may know her. Some of you may know of her. She's an author and a religious leader. And in 2014, Time magazine placed her on the top 100 list for most influential people in the world. Not too shabby. So Barbara explains it like this. She says that Jesus is describing different kinds of people, hoping that his listeners will recognize themselves as one kind or another. And then he makes the same promise to all of them. He makes the same promise to all of them. And what is that promise? Think Ferris Wheel and what was said before. Top will be bottom and bottom will be top. So the promise is simply that the way things are now is not the way they will always be. Jesus is tipping us off, giving us a hint. The Ferris wheel will go around and around, right? What she's saying as she interprets Jesus is that those people at the top of the Ferris wheel, swaying back and forth, enjoying their position in life, with the wind blowing in their hair, that sort of thing, the lights at their feet, they're on top of the world. Well, they'll have their turn at the bottom. And of course, those on the bottom will have their chance at the top, their chance to touch the stars, so to speak. So as it relates to advice from Jesus or a prediction, which is what I took it as at first glance, that's not the case at all. It's not advice. It's not even judgment. Jesus is simply telling us about the way things work. He's telling us the truth about how things are. And as Barbara stated, quote, it's pronounced by someone who loves everyone on that wheel, unquote. Jesus, of course. The Beatitudes, and this is Barbara talking again, the Beatitudes don't tell us what to do. They tell us who we are. And more importantly, they tell us who Jesus is. So the point here is, or maybe what I should say is what the point is not, back to Kate Alexander, the point is not to put us into two camps, people about to face the blessings or the ones about to face the woes. That's not it. That's not the point. The point is life comes in both forms. And in each one, there is something that needs to be healed by the healer that we have in common with each other, Jesus. The gospel begins with a description of people crowding around Jesus, and they have all kinds of needs, and he cures them all. And what's so interesting is Jesus and his healing extends past the obvious. Things like hunger, poverty, needs like that. But his healing extends to people who don't even realize they need it. People who are wealthy and have all their wants met, who are generally happy people, even these people need healing. And for them, well, it may not be obvious, but also the healing they need may not be within their lifestyle. They miss out. In Kate's article, she invites the readers to consider where they are on the Ferris wheel of fortune and misfortune, and then to take heart. Take heart, because if you are suffering now, it will not always be this way. I know it's difficult when it's happening in the here and now, in the present, the hunger, the poverty, the victimization. We're on the top of the Ferris wheel, arrogance, pride, self-importance, conceit. But Jesus promises that healing will come in time. And remember this too. And this is also hard to accept sometimes. In time, in quotes, doesn't mean our time. It's his time. So we have to have faith, and we had better humble ourselves that it's God's grace which keeps us going, which sustains us. Let me wrap up Kate's Jesus and the Ferris Wheel article with this. She reminds us that Jesus invites us all to see the whole Ferris wheel, the ups and the downs, the circular motion, each cart, all of it. If we do, maybe we could understand what God sees, and we could understand that God's grace is the answer. And we will see ourselves and everyone else as he does. Wouldn't that be great? We can be healed. That's what the Beatitudes promise us. And when we see it, when we truly see it and start to understand, then we'll start to see the world unified instead of in divided camps like so many of us do now. Maybe one of our goals should be to try to see the whole Ferris wheel like Jesus does, and to love all the riders like Jesus does. And as Kate writes, to trust that wherever we find ourselves on the wheel today, the healing that we need is close at hand. I hope you like this episode. And I also hope that whenever you're at a carnival or an amusement park and you see that mighty Ferris wheel, well, I hope you think of Jesus and our similarities to him. Remember, we were created in God's image. Until next time.